right. Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar. Today, I have with me Christian Kalb, and Christian is the owner of Pro3 Properties. Pro3 Properties is out of the Niagara area, and he's been an investor for over 10 years. Christian, welcome to the webinar, and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you very much for having me.
Great. And Christian, so I usually like to start these off just by a little bit of a background. How did you get involved in real estate, and what is Pro3 Properties about?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I'm going to try to give you the short version because there's a long version. But basically, I was part of the so-called corporate rat race in downtown Toronto, working for a software company. I was on the GO train doing my thing, working, and long days, long hours, good income, good benefits, but something just didn't feel right. And I always knew at some point I'm going to be working for myself. I just didn't know what it's going to be, right? And I tried a bunch of things before that, failed at a few things. I was always trying. I was always trying to do research, and I went to franchise shows and you name it. And then eventually, once we purchased our first home, it was kind of very basic, a little bit run down. And over the years, started putting a lot of work into it, and a new furnace and a new water heater and all these things. And then after a few years, it came to the discussion like, okay, are we going to, we need something larger. And what are we going to do? And typically what you do is you sell your home, your small home, and buy a bigger one, and your mortgage gets bigger and your house gets bigger. And then somehow I read a book, and I also got I was exposed to Rich Dad Poor Dad as well. So that book definitely changed everything for me. And I found out that you could refinance your existing property and use the fund, pull out the equity to put it down on another property. And as scary as it was, and as scary as it sounded, I thought it was a good idea, because we put so much blood, sweat, and tears into that first property. I refused to sell it. And yeah, so that's kind of the short version. So from then on, I ended up purchasing my first one a few years later in St. Catharines, when St. Catharines wasn't really on the map.
Mm-hmm.
And people thought I was crazy. My friends thought I was crazy, and it's so it's so far away and whatnot. And yeah, and then I just discovered cash flow, and I discovered how you can add value to existing resale properties, and yeah, the rest is history.
That's great. And I'd also like to mention to everybody that we're going to do some Q&A at the end. So as Christian and I talk, if you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat, and we'll answer them we'll answer them at the end. Now, with that said as well, today, if you've registered for the webinar, you probably know we're going to be talking about managing your growing portfolio. As Christian alluded to, he started off with his first property in St. Catharines. And I'd be curious, what appealed to you about Niagara? I know Pro3 Properties mostly operates out of Niagara now still. What appealed to you back then, and what appeals to you about the area for the future?
Yeah, that's another great question. So back then, it was a completely different environment. As you know, you're very well aware of that. St. Catharines wasn't really on the map. Niagara Falls was I would say a 90% tourist destination. So in the wintertime, it was very quiet. Welland, I barely knew anything about Welland, but what was appealing to me at the time, one thing for sure was the entry point to get into the market. So basically the price point at the time, which is obviously inflated today, but it's still comparable to the rest of the GTA, the rest of Southern Ontario. It's still somewhat comparable to what it was back then as far as percentage. And for me, it was also, and this may sound funny, but the climate. It's always a little bit warmer. Spring starts a couple of weeks earlier, and fall lasts a few weeks longer. I know it sounds crazy, but there's so many days when I'm walking around in Niagara and I'm like, I look at my phone, it's like it feels warmer here. You know, it feels
Mhm.
warmer, and I do a check and it's 5 degrees, 6 degrees warmer. So that was definitely a factor. And just overall, I always felt like, and I still feel like that today. I feel like it's a little bit undervalued, underperforming, underappreciated. Not a hidden gem anymore, but so you know, it's like the best kept secret of Southern Ontario. I still feel like certain pockets of Niagara are still like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, like you alluded to, it's probably no longer the hidden secret, but still a lot of value to be extracted
Hmm.
there. And with respect to that first expansion that you did when you got out of the rat race, like you said, and you sort of moved forward into taking on some more rentals. What were some of the risks you were worried about, and how can people kind of learn from you and your experiences in taking that step from maybe that
Hmm.
first or that second property, where they've started to just maybe see this as a potential avenue for them as
Hmm.
a long term to diversify, or maybe even to get out of the rat race like you did. What are some of the risks that people should consider when moving out of that early stage? And what are some of the things they should be trying to do to make sure they do it correctly?
Yeah, that's another excellent question. So as far as risks, I think we have to start off by separating fear, an emotional state of mind from actual risks, right? Because as an investor or an early investor or a non-investor, there's a lot of fear that's is now looking back was very rational. And you hear all these stories, right? Like the nightmare tenants, the tenants from hell
Mm-hmm.
that never paid and they trash your house and they poured concrete down your toilets. And so those stories obviously exist. They're real, but as far as the likelihood of running into something like that is probably 0.01%. There's a lot of fear in the beginning, but yeah, it all comes down to risk management and risk mitigation. So one of the biggest risks that I believe for new investors is dealing with tenants, and especially what I do with my strategy is multi-unit properties. So you have multiple tenants that live at the same property. So they share a driveway, they share the building, so to speak, maybe a laundry room, maybe an entrance. I mean, there's many things. They could be sharing a hydro panel, which is not ideal, but it happens.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of risks there as far as the property management is concerned. But what I see a lot of new investors do is they don't really think about the cash flow aspect too much. So it's like there's more emphasis on the appreciation. So, I'm going to purchase a property today for a certain price, and then in 2 years it's going to be $200,000 more. So to me, that's speculation, right? I mean, we're very privileged to live in one of the best and hottest real estate markets in the world, literally. And yeah, if you look at the chart, it's out of this world. It's not even, it's there's not many places in the world that see this type of appreciation, right? So I understand where they're coming from, but I think that's actually a big risk, because if you're getting into a rental property and there's no cash flow or very little cash flow, are you really prepared for emergencies? Or do you have contingency funds? Um, there's COVID, there's a pandemic. Are you prepared to deal with a situation where rent is not coming in for whatever reason?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the risk, the number one risk that I kind of felt for myself is like, if I do this, I have to figure out a way to generate as much cash flow as possible.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that makes a lot of sense. And I mean, I understand as well that you didn't just come from this background either. You were originally
Hmm.
in software, correct?
Yeah, I was in software, and before that, and that's why I mentioned the story. That was a short story. I lived in 5 different countries. Before that, I was traveling, Australia. So I did all kinds of odd jobs and bartender, server,
Right.
all kinds of stuff, admin jobs, insurance jobs. I guess you could say very adaptable, very agile.
Mhm.
But yeah, the last job in the corporate world that was actually I was really excited about it. That was in the software industry. So yeah.
And coming from that space, though, obviously being a landlord or being a property management is a way different game. What gave you the confidence, or what made that decision for you to go and just decide, okay, I'm going to do this full time, as
Mhm.
opposed to continuing working and hiring a property manager?
That's yeah, that's a good one too. So the 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 number one reason why I ended up doing it is it was just the desire to work for myself, the desire to or hunger to be my own boss and to make my own decisions and not to work for someone, not to make someone else rich, basically. Um, and as far as hiring or not hiring a property manager, or a property management company, I did a lot of research. So generally speaking, whenever I get into something, I tend to do a lot of research. I used to be a, paralysis by analysis kind of guy.
Mhm.
It felt like sometimes it was coming out of my ears, all this information, and
Right.
it was a little too much. And eventually, I think I just got tired of researching and I had it got to a point where I had to do something, right? um, and I did. So part of that research, I remember listening to a lot of smaller, or not smaller, but maybe medium sized investors or companies, and a lot of times they would say, like, make sure especially in the beginning, do your own property management, learn as much as you can yourself, and that way not only will you save the money for the property management fees and any other costs that are associated to taking that route, but also you just gain that experience and you figure out all these little tricks of the trade, basically, and those will allow you, down the road, that will allow you to sit down with a property manager or property management company and ask the right questions. Because if you have never managed your own property or your own duplex, triplex, fourplex with specific types of dynamics, how would you know what questions to ask? How would you know that the person sitting across from you is actually an expert at that matter? And that really that made a lot of sense to me, and that's how I started doing it. And also in the beginning, I needed every penny of the cash flow, right? Because the goal was to replace my income,
Mhm.
my salary, right,
Okay.
with cash flow that was generated from the business. So in the beginning, there was no room to even hire someone,
Okay.
basically.
Yeah, no, no, that's fair, and I can only imagine kind of some of the uncertainty making that jump early on. But it sounds like you did a good job of making sure you did as much research as you can to kind of minimize
Mhm.
the risk. But was there anything that maybe was unexpected that came up over those early days, or that even has just come up in general for you that nobody told you about? Things that you don't find in the books? Are there anything that people need to watch for when they go out on their own or when they start expanding that portfolio?
Yeah, there's many things. There's tons of things. I don't think we'll have enough time to discuss everything,
Fair enough.
but I think it also comes down to your own expectations, right? So when you are younger, you don't have any experience, and you're approaching a project like this, and keep in mind, I was doing renovations to properties, and I would not consider myself a handy person. So that kind of added to the stress, and it added to some sort of mixed feelings about expectations. But yeah, it comes down to expectations, and it comes down to your own little bubble, what you're envisioning. So in the beginning, I envisioned, oh, I'm going to be working with older tenants, and they're going to be quiet, and they have pensions, and the money comes in every month, and you have this vision. And then sure enough, one of my first tenants was a retired couple, and it was nothing like what I envisioned. It was very different. And this is actually a funny story. So I had this couple, I think these were I think my second tenant in Niagara.
Mhm.
And I got along with them. I screened them very well. We had good conversations. My gut feeling was good. They they ended up getting the keys, and they started moving, their furniture into the unit. And one of the main reasons why they were moving is to downsize.
Mhm.
Well, I guess they underestimated the situation, and they never ended up even sleeping one night in my apartment because it turned into a permanent storage facility,
Wow.
and you could barely even move in there. So I don't know if they were the hoarder type, not necessarily a messy hoarder, but I think they had a hard time to let go of their furniture and
Mhm.
antiques and stuff like that. And so it came down to them breaking the lease after 6 months, and they ended up moving out because they couldn't even live in the apartment because it wasn't big enough for them.
Well, really, that's an interesting one. And you touched on renovations there. I know
Mhm,
something that you mentioned early on, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but I believe we've talked about this when we first met,
mhm,
was that you're a big fan of those multiple dwellings, and you've even done some
mhm,
of those renovations yourself, where you've taken a single or a double and upgraded to a double or a triple.
mhm.
And this is a question we actually get all the time here at Tenantcube. What is involved with those types of renovations? What steps do people have to take to get started? Who do they need to contact? What does a
Mm.
process like that look like? Because I know that's something we get asked a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. So, the in this day and age, the accessory dwelling unit, the ADU, is a very popular way to add an apartment or to add a legal apartment to an existing structure, an existing property. So it really depends on the type of property and what you're looking to do. But if you're looking at like a traditional 60s, 70s bungalow in, let's say, St. Catharines North End, the easiest way is to, renovate and finish the basement and turn it into a legal apartment, right? It sounds like an easy process, but if you go through the right channels, so if you're hiring, a designer that can, takes all the measurements, he has some experience with, the whole process, obtain permits, go through the city, the whole, to go through the whole process, it's not, I don't want to say it's difficult, but it's definitely not as straightforward and as simple, especially the first time. The first time you definitely run into a lot of challenges and surprises,
Mhm.
but once you've done a few of them, it's pretty straightforward. But yeah, converting the basement into a legal accessory suite is definitely the most popular way to do it, or the prob maybe not the most cost effective, but it's simple, right? And especially if you go for one of those properties, like I said, a bungalow from the 60s, 70s, the side entrance is already there, maybe a back entrance, a wide driveway. Maybe it's even raised up a little bit, so you might even have egress windows, existing windows that are, meet the legal size of egress windows. I mean, uh, that would be the number one way to do it. I've done some other projects as well, like turning a triplex into a fourplex.
Mhm.
I'm doing a flip right now where it's an existing duplex, but it's just not very functional, and it's very, very run down. Um, but yeah, I mean, as far as the process, I personally prefer to work with a designer,
Mhm.
someone who has done it before. Um, once you're in this game, so to speak, you meet a bunch of them. I would say there's like a handful of really good ones that have experience with it. And then it depends on the city, so on the municipality. So St. Catharines, for example, is considered to be one of the most complicated cities to work with as far as inspections and working with the inspectors. even get obtaining the permits. Then on the other hand, a city like Welland is completely different reputation, easy to work with, and I'm actually starting a new project on September 1st in Welland, and the goal is to turn an existing duplex into a fourplex.
Oh, really? And
Yeah.
so you're going to double it up in opportunity. And how do you plan to do that?
Yeah, so the building, it's a large house, and I'm kind of surprised that we were able to secure it, because the market has been very, I would say ultra competitive.
Mhm.
So we got a little lucky there, at the right place at the right time. But it's a big building in downtown Welland, and it has an addition in the back that was added. I still don't know exactly when it was added, but a long time ago. So there's an existing unit with an existing tenant, and then you basically have the entire house. And we will take the upper level and the attic space and convert that into one apartment, and then the main floor into another apartment, and then the basement into another apartment. And there's already existing entrances. So this property it was perfect. Like when I showed up, my eyes were glowing. I'm like, wow, there's everything is ready to go here. We just need to, you know, get lucky with the city and with the planning and building department, and hopefully they'll approve it. So we don't have the permits yet, but so far it's been going pretty good.
Well, that's great. And I mean, it sounds like you've definitely come a long way since you started. And with respect to Pro 3, like as an organization,
Mhm.
was that something that came along after you went solo or as part of getting out there on your own? How did Pro 3 come to be?
Yeah, I think basically what I did is I kind of fast tracked my way into the full-time real estate investing in
Mhm.
the beginning, and in that first year of doing the full-time gig, I basically had three properties back to back that I had to figure out, how to renovate them as fast as possible, and get the cash flow in. So in that year alone, I learned so much. And I definitely learned a few things the hard way, which that's just how it works. But I learned so much, and I really started to enjoy what I was doing. And then I went to a few classes about, creating your corporation, and how to set things up with multiple properties. And so that was, it just seemed like a natural step to take it to the next level.
Mhm.
Um, and yeah, so now we work with joint venture partners, and multiple joint venture partners, and we're trying to aggressively grow and do more projects, every year. So
That's great. And I know you, again, obviously, given the scope of the work you're doing now, I think it's safe to say you've been pretty successful in your journey. For somebody who is looking at going down this path, at Tenantcube, a lot of the landlords we deal with, they are in that stage where either they're new landlords or they're trying to expand. They've got a smaller
mhm.
operation and they would like to get to the point that you're at. But I know for a lot of people through some of the conversations I've had, they're always unsure as if they make that choice, what are things going to look like, maybe where you are 10 years down the road. What does an average day look like for you now, having a larger operation in which it consists of all your time? What's your day look like today?
Yeah. What does my day look like? Every day is different,
Right.
and I think that's one of the aspects that I really like. Every day is different. I When there's active projects, I would say I'm definitely more involved than your traditional investor. As far as, I like to be, I still get my hands dirty once in a while, for sure. Demo day is fun.
Everybody
Even
loves demo day.
Yeah, even if it's a really disgusting house, demo day is still fun, and I enjoy that. Sometimes flooring, sometimes painting, framing can be fun if you know what you're doing. I don't know what I'm doing, but there's some components to it that are pretty straightforward. But yeah, I'm pretty involved. So when there's projects going on, depending on, the phase that the project's in, I see myself, going to Lowe's. So I have all these, commercial accounts with all these companies. So picking up orders, dropping stuff off at the job site, meeting with the plumber, making sure he has everything he needs. So, I'm more involved. Like I said, I do trust my people, or my team. I trust them, but I feel like when it gets to these certain types of projects, you want to be more involved. You want to be aware of, what's going on. It's not a micromanagement thing.
Mhm.
There's days where I don't go, and then I come back and I have this massive pile on my desk, and then it's an admin day, right? So I have a probably one day a week, maybe half a day is like admin day, right? Just catching up on all the receipts, paperwork, emails. As you know, I'm not the greatest at getting back to you via email, so I apologize.
That's great. That's all right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I guess the one other thing, I'd personally be curious about, because I think a lot of people are unsure. Again, especially with the people we're likely talking to today.
Mhm.
You had mentioned that early on, you were trying to save every penny, and that's one of the reasons why you didn't go the property manager route. But now you've actually got a team. At what point did it become apparent that you need a team? And when do you recommend people start actually looking at a team and putting that team together? How do you build a team over time?
Yeah, that's another excellent question. How it just gets to a point where you just can't be at two or three places at the same time.
Right.
And if you have the desire and the hunger to continue to grow, and I guess another way of putting it is like everybody has a plan, and then plans change, right? So initially one of the goals was, oh, I'm never going to sell any of these properties. I'm going to keep them as long as possible. But then life happens. There's maybe a joint venture where you have to refinance, or you want to refinance, but you are unable to for whatever reason. So you end up selling a property, which is not the worst. It's not terrible, especially when you're making a profit, or when you force the appreciation. But now you're losing some of your cash flow, and then you need to move some funds over to the next one. So it just kind of gets to a point where you just realize, like, you know what, I can't do this all on my own. And you naturally kind of build a team. And this is actually something I didn't mention, but really it's all about relationships, right? It's all about relationships, right? I I've been working with my electrician for over 5 years now. We're good friends. We trust each other. It's a great relationship. Same thing with my plumber, same thing with my handyman, and it takes time, right? I mean, I don't necessarily have one specific go-to guy for everything, but I have my Rolodex, my contacts, and yeah. So I guess to answer your question, it just gets to a point where you realize, this is not scalable. So if you really want to scale, um, you start to sit down, you have these conversations like, hey, listen, I'm looking to do more of this. Can we work together? Are you interested in maybe, you know, giving me some peace of mind next time I pick something up? Like, can you help me out like maybe a little bit earlier? And you build this relationship, and it goes both ways, right? Like when a contractor sends me an invoice or a bill, I don't wait 30 days to pay them, right? I pay them on time, right? Every time. So yeah, so I hope I answered your question.
Yeah, no,
I'm not sure.
absolutely. That's great. And just being respectful of your time, because we really want to thank you
Mhm.
for joining with us today. We typically do about half hour, so a little bit of back and forth, and we open it up to some questions. And I've had some questions come through. Are you okay for a few questions
Yeah,
here? So I'm going to start
absolutely.
off. I'm going to start off with a fun one that came in. Do you know where
Fun.
the couple slept? So you had that older couple of tenants. They didn't stay on site. Do you know where they stayed? Did they get a hotel? Did they get a home? Or
At their daughter's house.
oh,
And
really?
yeah, she was not very happy about it. And it was the entire 6 month period. I still, to this day, I still can't wrap my head around it. And it got so bad. that when I wanted to inspect the property or the apartment, so it's an apartment that's now a triplex.
Mhm.
I literally I could barely squeeze my body through all the furniture.
Right.
But yeah, they slept at their daughter's house, which was, a few blocks, away, and they never ended up staying there. I don't think they ever took a shower or anything. It was just storage.
That's definitely I've heard a lot of tenant stories. I'm sure you can imagine having lots of these
Hmm.
conversations, and that's one of the more interesting
Yeah.
ones. I don't think I've ever heard of somebody who's had a place and not stayed one night there. So that's a new one, I think, for me
Yeah.
and probably the audience. So I've got another one. It's short-term rentals. What are your thoughts?
Hmm.
Are you
Yeah.
involved with short-term rentals, and what do you think
Yeah.
about
Yeah, short-term rentals. So I have a good amount of experience with short-term rentals as well. There was a time when we had two different short-term rentals going on simultaneously, also in Niagara. Um, Today we have one, so we've been focusing on that one. I think we've had it for almost 6 years, 5.5 years now. So Airbnb Superhost, 4.9 stars, VRBO Premier Partner, and I don't know, TripAdvisor. They're dying, so I
it?
don't know what my status is there. But yeah, short-term rentals can be an excellent vehicle, an excellent strategy. Um, but there are definitely some risks. Getting back to the original conversation about risks and fear. So one of the short-term rentals that I was running a few years ago, we basically ran into the whole situation with the city and neighbors that were unhappy. And once you kind of get into that whole situation, you realize that it is, the law and the bylaws are very much pro, corporations, pro hotels,
Hmm.
and that you don't have a lot of rights. So, and I ended up, trying to turn it into a bed and breakfast, and we tried a whole bunch of things, but if you have a way to run a legal short-term rental and you have some sort of way to create a wow factor,
Hmm.
if you're able to do that, it's an excellent strategy. And I'm actually kind of looking into maybe getting another one if possible. But then again, the location, right? Because urban versus cottage, driving 2-3 hours, now you have to outsource everything, which is fine. But yeah, I love short-term rentals, and Airbnb has changed since COVID. I have to be completely honest with you. So as a host, don't expect Airbnb to back you up, because they won't.
Hmm.
And this may sound negative, but I've dealt with a few situations where I was shocked how Airbnb was very difficult to work with, and ever since COVID, everything has changed. So the service levels, the customer service levels for hosts in particular, are very close to terrible.
Yeah, I've heard, yeah, that opinion elsewhere as well. I know COVID's kind of thrown a wrench into everything,
Mhm.
and so I
Yeah,
guess short-term rentals are no exception. And so I'd like to wrap it up for one here, more one. I guess this is more of a personal question, but
sure.
were you scared to make that leap? Like, did you have that back of your head?
100%. 100%.
Yeah.
100%. So there were two key milestones as far as, major fear, and there were two snapshots in my head that never forget. So the first one was the day I signed the two mortgages. So we had that very first property that I mentioned to you, and then we ended up refinancing it and purchasing the next one. So there was one particular moment where I remember signing two mortgages, and it it scared the beep out of me.
Right.
It was I'll never forget that. And then a few years later, when I ended up deciding, okay, this is it, it's now or never, I'm going full time. Um, I ended up finding a gentleman from CIBC, and he doesn't work there anymore, but he was an expert or a specialist at mortgages for investors, and they had a program. They may still have it, but they have had a program where if you own a couple of properties, you were able to scale up to 5, moving equity around and that kind of stuff. But basically, he came to my house. He had a driver. He came to my house, sat across my desk here, and we ended up signing 5 mortgages in one day because we had to refinance 2,
Hmm.
and then I purchased 3 that were staggered, like closing in September, December, January, I believe it was. And yeah, I signed 5 mortgages in one day. I'll never forget that day. So yeah, I was scared to death,
Yeah.
to be honest with you. Yeah.
So for anybody who's watching, if you're feeling that way and you're in a similar situation, I think Christian can probably allude to you've all been there. I guess then maybe
Yeah.
I've got one last question for you. Do you still kind of get butterflies or any nerves or anything when you're doing some of these deals or getting into large renovations, or is it all confidence after all the success over the years?
I would say the confidence levels definitely go up, and but real estate, and this is one thing I love about real estate, is you never stop learning.
Right.
You never stop learning. Um, Obviously your appetite gets larger. For some people, maybe they want to go into commercial. Some people want to get into big buildings. I've researched a lot of different things. I'm you never stop learning. So as far as these renovations and stuff, every property is different. The neighbors are different. The cities are different. So I continue to run into situations where you become a problem solver, and not every problem is the same problem, right? So uh, I mean, I might as well share this, but just the other day, I think this was just a couple of days ago, one of the neighbors of a property I just purchased verbally and almost physically attacked one of my contractors.
Wow.
And yeah, the police was called. There was a police report. And what it came down to parking. It was a parking situation. So, and that's not necessarily learning about real estate, but
Mhm.
yeah, it's you definitely there's a good amount, there's a healthy amount of confidence, but it's life, right? You never stop learning, and you always have to have a problem solving hat on, right?
Yeah, and it sounds like never a dull moment, eh? Right. So it's great to get some of your experience and understand some of your learnings over time. So I do want to thank you for joining us today. I'd like to thank everybody for attending. We'll send you out a copy of this webinar, and I would also encourage you to go check out Pro3's website. That's pro3.ca to learn more about what they do and to learn more about Christian, because he's got a great story and a wealth of knowledge for you guys. So thank you for everybody for joining us, and Christian, thank you for joining us as well.
Thanks, Darren. I appreciate your time. That was fun.
Yes, it was a great conversation. Thank you so much, and
Okay.
everybody have a great night. Thank you.
Thanks, Darren. Bye, everybody.